man who became a legend in his own time in the world of professional wrestling, the Oklahoma Stampeder, Cowboy Bill Watts.
Columbus, Ohio. I'm on my way. A lot of history. Al Haft, Frankie Tolliver, Carl Gotch, Dr. Bill Miller, and Ohio State University with a great football team. But you know one thing about it, Reeser. When you're a specialist, you only come when you call for. And so I don't have to come too often because a lot of times have changed. Ole and Gene Anderson, they run over everybody, cripple them and hurt them. Well, they picked on the son of a plumber, the little bully from Austin, my friend Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, and he called me. And just like the specialists that they all remember from Oklahoma, they kicked that great place kick when the University of Oklahoma played Ohio State. The big Cowboys coming, and when I walk in, I walk tall, just like Buford Pusser, that old Tennessee sheriff. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to whip them. I'm going to feed them this 2x4 where they can eat sawdust, and you know what they'll be doing. Dusty Rhodes, American Dream, and Cowboy Bill Watts, Columbus, Ohio.
What's your country? That cool. Are you talking a main pro wrestling radio? The damn cool. Call in with a question or comment. Just bring it. At 1-888-922-2149. Oh, it's true. Don't make me hurt you. That's hard time. I hate your ever. And now your host of the show. That's how I
All right, welcome to a very special edition of Pro Wrestling Radio. We are going to be joined for the entire hour today by the author of the #1 best-selling wrestling book, according to Amazon.com, for this past week. The book is The Cowboy and the Cross. He is the legend. Let's bring him up without any further ado. Cowboy Bill Watts. Mr. Watts, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. You know, listening to that sound bite before, I had even forgotten about that deal in Columbus, Ohio, and what a fun thing. I think the one really fun thing for me is when I revisit these different programs and the publicity aspect of the new book. Mm-hmm. You guys are so much more up to date on everything than I am, and I recall some fabulous memories, and I appreciate it, and I thank you for them.
Oh, my pleasure. And I absolutely love when I have legends like yourself on, and I get to go into my archives and dig up the old clips and just like to hear your reaction to yourselves from 20, 30 years ago.
I'm ready for you to send me a copy of that one. As a kick, I'd forgotten that interview, but yeah, you know, the interviews were such a part of it, and I learned that in a process that I think when I really came to life was when I used to go to Hawaii a lot, going to Japan, or when Roy Shires, when he was out there, and they formed a partnership for the big shows, the HIC, but I'll never forget Ed Francis and Lord Blears, and them had an hour and a half of wrestling. In an hour and a half of wrestling, they only had 2 matches. Wow. And all the rest was interviews and talking, and I was blown away. But it kind of planted that seed later that I realized that people wanted to know the celebrities. They wanted to know the people that they related to, and you could only do so much in the ring, but they wanted to know what your personality is, what you thought, and how you reacted. And so that really gave me an insight into that later in my promotion that became very important.
Well, that's tremendous. And when we talk about your promotion, we talk about Mid-South and the UWF for the younger fans listening into the show here. And nowadays, over the last couple of years, there seems to be a big swing, especially in the WWE, on scripted promos. What are your thoughts on scripted promos?
Well, you know, everything in the WWE is scripted. You know, it was such a disappointment to me the 3 months I was with Vince. I'll never forget, there was a problem that happened. We won't go into it, where everybody was late, and so we were having a television shoot, and I had 2 top stars, and like they were going to have a 10-minute match, and they didn't have enough time to get ready for it because they only had an hour before showtime. An hour for a 10-minute match. I was fractured. I remember one time there was such bad weather that the planes would quit flying, and I was stuck in Little Rock on the way to Jackson, Mississippi, and I called the promoter, George Culkin, my partner, And I said, I can't make it. He said, you've got to make it. This is sold out. And this is before we knew what a market Jackson was. He'd been telling us.
Mm-hmm.
He said, it's sold out. He said, it's wall to wall. You've got to get here. Can you get here? So I chartered a single-engine Bonanza to go through this tornado. You know, and so this guy was an excellent pilot, and I was a pilot. And so we picked our way around it, and we got to the airport. It was 11 o'clock at night, and the police were raiding, police escort to the arena. I was wrestling the spoiler with Gary Hart as the manager. Went in the ring and had a 40-minute match. I mean, I ran right in, changed clothes, and we were in separate dressing rooms, changed clothes, went in the ring. Everything was just exciting. The people were going crazy. I mean, they had waited till 11:30.
Wow.
And it was packed. And, I mean, I thought to myself, what were these two guys doing if they had to really earn their money?
Yeah.
And didn't have... How long would it take to talk about a 40-minute match? So, you know, and I'm not knocking the sport. That's where it's become. And the guys, let me tell you, guys will respond to whatever the challenge. So I'm not putting them down either. I'm not like an bitter old-timer saying it's not as good as it was. I'm just saying it's a different concept. And I've always believed that athletes could do whatever you needed them to do if you pushed them beyond their comfort zone. But if you want to, if you want to make it a certain way, they're going to take the easiest route.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, and the only reason I'm going to bring this up now, I had to say for later in the interview, is because it's appropriate for what you're talking about. If you can tell the story, because I've heard it told in interviews by yourself and by Paul Orndorff. There was a story, and I know there's a clean version you'll have to give me for the radio, a story about Ted DiBiase and Paul Orndorff being reluctant to go to a Broadway.
Well, yeah, and you got to realize that I didn't design many Broadways in my promotion or in my career.
Mm-hmm.
They had to have a special significance, because I thought so often that was used as a way out of not having any more creativity.
Mm.
But there was a perfect situation with Paul and Teddy, and one of them we were getting ready to turn one of them heel. I can't remember which one. And this was their last match in Jackson, Mississippi, together as baby faces, and they knew they were going to be a heel. One of them was going to be. And so they were wanting to jump the gun, but they couldn't. Even though we already had shot the television, I think the day before, but it hadn't gone yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, then when I came up with the hour of Broadway, I mean, you'd think I'd taken their last meal from them. And Orndorff especially was a fiery guy, and he and I used to disagree on so many things, but I had a great respect for what he could do in the ring, which again proves that you don't have to, you're not dating them, you don't have to live with them in order, as long as the guy gave me 100% in the ring, I can sometimes put up with these other idiosyncrasies, and Orndorff and I have a great respect and I think a great appreciation for each other now. He called me years later and told me how much he learned from me, and of course when I went to WCW, I hired him back to do some work there for us, which he was excellent in doing.
Mm-hmm.
But to make a long story short, they were just crushed, and so they came to me and said, man, boss, we can't do this hour. I mean, that's an hour. Broadway's baby faces, that's so hard to do. Can one of us go ahead and go into this new era? I said, no. And kept on, and they kept whining around, kept coming back to me. So finally, I knew the time was to challenge them.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally said, well, listen, guys, I understand you guys just don't quite have what it takes. And I'll lighten the word up. I'll say you're cripples and can't go further. So if you can't make it, you got to still go within 5 minutes of the hour, and here's a finish to get you out of this, and we'll do this finish. But because you can't make it, because you're not the man I thought you were. And boy, they went out there. They went the hour in a babyface match and had the audience standing and completely with them.
Wow!
Completely mastered the situation. There was two new guys that came out of that ring. There were two guys that grew that night and realized that they could do what they thought was impossible to do. That challenged, that they could meet the challenge and go forward, and that's the difference. Sometimes they're the defining moment. I remember when Dusty Rhodes truly became the American Dream in Tampa, Florida. Mm-hmm. In the interview he did about being the son of a plumber and a brown bagger against Hart and Pac Song, I mean, I'm sitting there watching, and goose pimples broke out on my arm. And he finally achieved where we were taking him. And so those were defining moments for people when they grew into that person. See, we didn't give somebody a gimmick and a name and then hope he made it. Mm-hmm. They had to grow into it to become what they were. They really truly developed and became what they were.
Yeah.
They had to carry the load.
Wow. That's a great story and so appropriate to what we're talking about. From what I understand, you're a big fan of mixed martial arts and the ultimate fighting. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm enjoying that, sure.
Okay.
I had a concept that I thought about doing I didn't have the octagon concept of that, but it was definitely going to be a shoot type of wrestling, and I had designed it and even figured out how to franchise cities, and then I just said, oh, that's just too expensive, and I didn't have the money or the wherewithal at the time, and I didn't know if anybody would buy it at the time. So it's exciting to see something of this genre, and yes, I do enjoy it.
Wow. Do you think that, and I've had guys from both sports, I had Ken Shamrock on here, and I asked Ken if he thinks that the Ultimate Fighting Championship can kind of compete with WWE, and he said he didn't think so. Do you think that a mixed martial arts can compete with pro wrestling?
I don't think it's the same, no. I don't think it's the same. I think you have the, first of all, it's being presented as a legitimate sport, and certainly WWE isn't. I mean, WWE is a cartoon character strip that's come to life. Yeah. And it's so far removed. You may have some crossover in fans, and certainly I think fans today are looking for any kind of entertainment or release or any type of idol worship they can find, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But I think they're two different genres. I think maybe your guys that came out of a legitimate background in sports might be more attracted to the ultimate UFC. Even the guys in wrestling, I'll bet you, that love that type of thing are probably big fans of UFC. Yeah. But I don't see it being a conflict. Yeah. One is total entertainment and total farce, and totally scripted, we know, and the other is pretty much. It seems like, from what I've seen so far, I never say never, because I've watched some stuff in Japan that was represented to be a shoot, and I've seen people in it, and I've watched things happen. I said, oh, baloney. That was a work. Right. What has kept you away from the wrestling business for the last, 10 years or so? Well, it's been a process, and the process happened to me and started happening in '84 when God started calling me back to himself and started challenging me, and it was very painful, very hard, because I was sitting on top of the world. Yeah. And, when he wants to get your attention, he's going to get your attention. He started getting mine, and I was just too arrogant, too proud to bend to his will, and he had to break me. And, in the process, I realized that I wanted out of a way of life, that I couldn't be in both. There's a saying that I like to take out of the Old Testament, the Bible, when you examine the life of Lot, the nephew of Abraham, and then, of course, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. But Lot was a world borderer. In other words, he wanted the righteousness of God on one hand, but he wanted to keep his feet in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so many of us are world borderers. And so pretty soon it becomes relativism instead of what's right and what's wrong. And that's what's attacking our culture now, is everything is decided by relativism instead of what's right and what's wrong. And actually the secularists don't want any form of moral or ethical conduct set by the government. They want whatever you feel right to be right, and that's just not true, whether you believe in God or not. God's laws are absolute. You can't break them, but you can break yourself on them. So I was learning all this the hard way, and that I wanted my cake and eat it too, and for me, I couldn't. And I'm not condemning anybody that's struggling with this or not struggling with it. That's between them and God. But so when I got out of the business, I'm like a dinosaur. What do you do with the rest of your life? I've been productive and always made money. But I could always go back to this business and make tremendous money. And it seemed like every time I went back, I still had all the technique and the knowledge and the ability to do what I needed to do to be successful. But I wasn't happy in it. And every time I'd go back, as you and I were briefly touching before we started this, is all the things that came on me that were part of my life, and that would come back on me. And so the anger and the lust and all these different things. And it just was a different way, because I think I'm not saying that I'm holier than thou. I am not. I'm in the garbage pail of flesh, but it's different that I'm saved by Christ, and by being saved, I strive to be more like him and reflect the love. See, I'm drawn to his love. I'm not out of fear. The fear gained my respect, but it's the love of Christ and how he loved me enough to die for me on the cross that's changing my life and continue to change my life, and I'll be in this process till the day I die. Yeah. So I love to talk about what's happened. I'm not ashamed of it. I mean, you can't hide it. Was it a good role model? Well, compared to today's stuff, yes, it was, but it still wasn't. It was a dysfunctional business, and all the families in it were dysfunctional, including my own. I used to think I was a good father until I looked back and realized that, it's not what you tell your kids that they learn, it's what they see and do.
Right.
And so, if I'm saying, son, don't drink and drive, and he said, Dad, you got a beer and you're doing 100 miles an hour. And I said, well, I can handle it. By guys, we drink every night going up and down the highway, and all the cops know us.
Right.
What a message I'm sending to my kid. It's a message of relativism.
Yeah.
It's okay for me to do it, but not them.
Did you find writing the book to be a real therapeutic thing for you?
You realize, Eric, I never wanted to write this book.
How did that come about?
People came about and were always asking me to write. And to me, I thought that to write a book about myself in wrestling is just another method for me to do self-aggrandizement. In other words, I don't know if anybody writing a book about himself in wrestling. It's not putting himself over.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that. And then most of the stories I would like to have told would have somebody they'd hurt.
Yeah.
And so finally Scott Williams came to me, and turns out Scott's a Christian, and he came to this project, and I said, Scott, if I can write this book about wrestling with a higher purpose, a purpose that I give something back, a purpose where I reveal that every choice we make in life has a consequence, and that if I can show these snapshots of my life and try to explain how I made these choices and their consequences, and that there is something, we got a problem as a human race. We have a terminal disease called mortality, and the current death rate's 100%. We don't like to think about death, especially our own, yet worldwide 3 people die every second, 180 every minute, and 11,000 an hour. And that brings up a huge question. Where are we going to spend eternity? And if you think that's all there is to life and that you're just going to burn up and go to oblivion, then live your life. There was a guy named Pascal who was a 17th century mathematician, and he said, and let me paraphrase it, he said something like this: I would rather live my life as if there is a God and to die and find out there isn't than live my life as if there isn't a God and die to find out there is.
Wow.
So I think the book became that we need to battle our culture for our children and their children, and for the fact that we can present that there is absolute truth, and that you don't need to do everything based on relativism or cultural impact or society, that there's right and wrong. And so if I could write this book showing this snapshot of my life and open my heart up and reveal myself, then I was for it. And that's what we did. And yeah, it was hard, and yeah, reliving it was fun, and it's kind of like when JYD died, and Buddy Landell asked me to write a eulogy for him that he wanted to read at JYD's funeral. And when I sat down and wrote that, I realized that I had never told JYD how much I loved him and cared for him, because he and I broke up when he went to WWF at the time. Yeah. The way he left was such a double cross with our relationship that it hurt deeply. And then, of course, he got hooked on the various substance abuses, and later told me when I was in Atlanta that, he'd made all that money and taken it all up his nose, or whatever you want to say, and, here he was, hooked on crack, and, bless his heart, this kid was a great kid. Choices and consequences. So I tried to use him again by telling him he had to get back in shape, and he just couldn't get back in shape. He wouldn't, so I couldn't use him. But when he died, see, what I missed is I never told him how much I loved him and how important he was, and how my life was blessed by that period of time he was in my life. And so that changed me too. I started trying to tell people that have come into my life, because see, now I believe, since I believe in a sovereign Lord, I believe there's no random events. I don't think anything happens by accident. I think everything's for a purpose. Do I think I understand the purpose? No, but I have to be open to it. And I realize people are brought into my life for a time or a season, and there's a meaning for that. And so I want to tell those that I have cared for, how deeply I've cared for them, and how blessed my life has been by their participation in my life. And so it started changing my life, and I was able to let go of a lot of anger and a lot of harbored grievance. Yeah. I'm a great file builder. I mean, we always have to. Was one of these guys that had to build a file in my mind, so I had a reason that appealed to my logic for how I treated you. Yeah. Isn't it funny, when you live by Christ's rule and Christ's model, you don't have to build any files because you treat people the way they're supposed to be treated.
That's interesting. I would never think of it that way.
So it's been a wonderful ongoing process. Hard at times. Times that, isn't it amazing that if by the definition of God, if God is God, then he is sovereign. Means, look up the definition of sovereign. Means in total control. Mm-hmm. And then we argue with ourselves about whether or not to submit to him. I mean, that's only a dumb wrestler would do. A dumb wrestler, been dropped on his head too many times, got too much ego, would have to stop and think that if the man upstairs that could snuff you at any minute is the man upstairs, that you got a problem putting him over?
Yeah. Yeah, that's wow. Well, listen, I want to ask if you can hold on. We're going to take a quick break.
All right.
And when we come back from the break, keep a listen because we're going to take another one of those walks down memory lane, the memory lane of Bill Watts promos. So I'll be interested for your thoughts on that promo when we get back as well.
Okay.
All right. And again, we are talking to the author of the #1 best-selling wrestling book. According to Amazon, you can buy the book now on Amazon.com, The Cowboy and the Cross. He is the legendary Bill Watts, and we are honored to have him. My name is Eric Orgiulo, and you're listening to the show in a couple of places. One, on the Internet, live all over the world on WBCB1490.com, archived on my website at ProWrestlingRadio.com, or on the air on WBCB 1490 AM.
Seemingly totally indestructible. A man you couldn't mention. He's fallen prey to the vultures, the Freebird family that's circling up, and they're circling over everybody. But like vultures, they don't want you to be able to fight back. They almost got Duggan, DiBiase, not Doc, myself. In order to beat that family, you've got to have a family. You've got to pull them together. They got to come together. That's why when you work out, you wear something that motivates you. Doc's there. It's like one of my own kids. He's my personal protege. You can't get down with it, Freebird. I'll tell you what, I'm going to get everybody I need, whatever I need, but we're going to clip your wings.
And now back to more Pro Wrestling Radio and your host of the show, Eric Orgiulo.
Welcome back to Pro Wrestling Radio, and again, that is the voice of the legendary Cowboy Bill Watts. What do you think listening to that promo?
One thing about it, I think everything I've done in life I've done with passion.
Yes.
And another thing I realized a long time ago is that you had to feel it. You had to believe and feel what you said and what you did. And so whether you were a villain or a babyface, to me, you had to have a lot of truth in your approach and in your interview. That's what always made the interviewing so easy for me is whatever I said is how I felt it.
Do you think that's why a lot of true athletes who you recruited, specifically like Doc and Duggan, do you think that's why they were such good promos, because as athletes they had that passion already inbred in them?
Well, somebody was asking me on a show the other day to name the ones I thought that were underrated or something like this, and that's so hard to do. There's so many. Each story to me is a personal story, but the bottom line is I can remember people that I thought were horrible. Or not, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. They were not really great, quote, workers in the ring, but by the force of their personality, by their promos, they just literally demanded your respect because they projected their internal person as to who they were. And for one that right quickly comes to mind is Mad Dog Vachon.
Oh, okay.
Mad Dog Maurice Vachon was so tough as a human being that he demanded. And you could feel that demand in him as far as when he presented himself and what he was going to do and where to his opponent or the likes of, that there was no doubt in your mind how tough he was. And he truly was a tough human being. Mad Dog Vachon was a tough human being. I've seen him in a couple of the tough street situations that he just overcame things that I was just blown away and impressed by him. And I'm proud to say that I got to know him and I had nothing but the greatest respect for him, and yet in the ring I never knew what he was going to do. I mean, sometimes you go out and have a fairly ordinary match, and sometimes you wouldn't. Even his brother Paul and they was notorious how they would be screaming and cussing each other out in French during a tag team match or a disagreement over the match, and Paul was so level and easygoing that almost some people would think, well, Paul's not near as intense and tough as Mad Dog. I got to disagree with the whole family was double tough. Paul was just a different personality.
Why do you think, and you and I talked a little bit before we went on the air, and I was telling you how much I just loved UWF growing up, and we got it here in Philadelphia on syndication. And since then, through the advent of tape trading, pretty much anybody that's a hardcore wrestling fan has seen UWF, and still to this day, my personal favorite. And why do you think, as the owner of the company, why do you think that it failed? Why do you think that you had to wind up selling to Jim Crockett?
Well, the big impact that decided it, first of all, I was wanting to get out of it anyway, but the impact that actually decided it wasn't competition. The impact that decided was the oil situation, which I'll never forget the Sheik in Detroit one time when his business was really down, and he was complaining because the car industry was in such a negative spin cycle, our downturn, and he's blaming it on the car industry. And I thought, what does that have to do with wrestling and the Sheik and everything else? I mean, I just don't understand what it has to do with it. Well, then the oil industry had its crunch, and when you got to realize that when a state's economy is set up to where $20 barrel oil is break even, and oil drops to $12 a barrel, that the state's economy goes broke, everything around it went broke. So when that happened in the oil states, all entertainment ceased to come. I mean, when you had country and western, rock and roll, and every form of entertainment canceled and no longer come to the state because they couldn't draw any money, it was a crisis. You had banks going broke. You had airlines going broke. You had. So my syndicator, his backer owned some of the big hotels in Houston and Dallas. I'm not talking about Motel 8. I'm talking about big hotels. He went broke.
Right.
The guy went broke, and so the guy ended up owing me $80,000 at the time when I was needing that money to operate, because as we were expanding out, we had to have our base income in order to feed the thing. So when you had this happening, and I'm going to show you a real dramatic deal, is that we ran Oklahoma City and Tulsa every 2 weeks. We were averaging $100,000 a show, which I know that's not big by today's standard, but back in the late '80s, that was a huge show in a town of 600,000 people.
Sure.
And we were doing 40,000 average in 40 to 60,000 in Tulsa every second week. And when the oil crunch hit and really took hold, we dropped to $14,000 a show.
Wow.
In Oklahoma City, and for some strange reason, Tulsa still continued to do like 18 or 20,000, but it dropped by almost a half. So all of a sudden, you're looking at all your things that you've used to analyze your business, and none of them make any sense. And so you're blaming it on your partners, you're blaming it on this, you're blaming it on that. But the bottom line is absolutely nothing. There was no way to read why your business was no longer functioning. And so you blamed it on yourself and this and that and the other. And in reality, is that this giant mega trend had hit. And it was truly a mega trend. And it just annihilated the entertainment business in these states. I mean, completely. And for some time, I'll never forget the way that we found out initially, and we'll carefully skirt the bounds of your show, which I totally support. Great. But that when we had a guy that was our advanced publicity guy who was from our office, who used to go to the major cities like New Orleans before the Superdome and would do a last-minute blitz on the media. And he called me to tell me that he had gone through every single yellow page ad in the New Orleans telephone book, and that all the escort services, because I guess he enjoyed getting down there and finding a certain type of escort that was going to thrill him that evening.
Right.
All the escort services were no longer in business. Every single one of them were out of business, and he couldn't hire a lady of the night. And I thought, well, wait a minute, what are you telling me this for? Well, what it was he was saying, and when I got down there and met him, we went and searched in the French Quarter, not because I was looking for I was trying to validate what he said, and we found there wasn't a single. What that meant was there was no entertainment dollars, that it had dried up. So we did for that show what our advance was. Well, generally we did three times advance. Our total gate was what advance did, and we had probably the best card we'd had, and Crockett was our partner in this one to bring in some bigger talent, and Crockett's looking at me like, you did a lousy job of promoting, and I'm offended by that, and all these different things. because we had no way of understanding we were caught in this mega trend that was totally changed forever our business as far as this period of time. So it was a very devastating period of time, and of course, again, at the same time, I was wanting to get out of the business anyway, so it just seemed like it was a good time to continue along with that. I know, but it wasn't due to the competition. That every time Vince brought the WWE, he's the first one that told me that when I went back that 3 months and worked for him, is that every time he came to my area, he got his fanny handed to him. I mean, we took him apart and just really completely kicked his little rear, and with our promotion. And Jim Ross was very intuitive in that. He had a great knack for that, and we did some things that just so Vince wasn't hurting us at all.
Yeah.
Where he was hurting us is the predatory practice, which, of course, is always, quote, denied.
Yeah.
Where he was stealing our talent. And if there's anybody that ever, of course, we don't see it anymore, where there's not much government intervention, and that's kind of a shame because corporations are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's going to be more and more people squeezed as the corporations get stronger and stronger, and people have less rights. But there's no more. You don't see here any more federal antitrust suits.
Yeah.
And because those are predatory practices when you come in, and if there's anybody that was ever had a predatory practice whacked against them, to me it was Vern Gagne. In that here's a guy who comes in and hires all his top talent out from under him, including his commentators.
Yeah.
And then here's Vern appearing on his show. Well, it's time to let go, and it's too late to undo it.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that was what really, really happened. And then Vern was one area that he targeted to really put out of business, and more so than he did me. And he didn't. And Vince didn't put me out of business.
Yeah.
So, but that's what happened.
Now, were you surprised? And I mean, I don't even know how closely you followed it after you sold, but were you surprised? And when I had Dusty on the show, I asked him, because he didn't write about it in his book. I asked him. I said, I don't understand as a fan why you never did a big invasion angle with UWF. And
well, I wonder why Dusty. I wonder why he would act like he didn't understand what you were saying.
Well, you want me to tell you what his answer was?
What?
His answer was, well, it was logistics. They were here, they were there.
Oh, baloney. Bless his heart, and bless Crockett's heart. Right. I just didn't know Crockett was that stupid. Here was something that was tailor-made. One thing I learned through the deal with Gunkel was that competition breeds awareness. And so that you could have competition, and it would actually be better for both. And so that's what I had even told Crockett. I said, my golly, you're in a perfect position here to have your own in-house competition that will create huge interest in your product by bringing the my deal against the NWA deal.
Yeah.
He seemed to embrace that. But you got to realize, and I don't know how much charity I need to lay here, but you got to realize that Crockett didn't know how to book. He never booked. He couldn't book. So he was at the mercy of his booker. And Dusty is a brilliant person, but if you look at Florida, it went broke under Dusty, and every place he touched went broke, because as good as he was at drawing gross gates, he had no consciousness of a bottom line, whether that it can be laid at his feet because maybe nobody ever taught him or whatever. He had no consciousness of a bottom line, so nothing was bottom line oriented. It was just whatever he dreamed up today. So there was not ever a lot of continuity. And so, he couldn't have followed something like that anyway, honest to goodness, without strong leadership, because that's just not where he was geared emotionally. And yet he was a tremendous, tremendous talent in the right situation.
Yeah.
But he was never geared to be running an operation like that, in my opinion, which Crockett was, unfortunately, Crockett couldn't make the tough management decisions necessary to rein it in, so instead caved in and gave in. Why would you need a 6-passenger jet in the wrestling business?
Right.
And so Crockett had me on consultant, which was a smart way to pay me off. It turned out to be a bite me in the rear, but I used to say, well, you're paying me, so let me send you some things that I see happening to you that you're really going the wrong direction in. You don't have to listen to them, but you might give him some. And he wouldn't even do that. He totally ignored me. He stonewalled me.
Wow.
And that's what somebody does, generally speaking, when they're going down the tube. They start stonewalling anything else. In other words, it's kind of like these. How many sports teams do you see? It's us against the world.
Yeah.
it's us against the world. No, it's not you against the world. It's what you choose to do because you're going to stonewall the world because you don't have the answers. Because it's never them against the world. The only time it's them against the world is when they're not doing well.
Right.
And when they're going on down the tube, then it makes it really convenient to say it's us against the world. It is not us against the world. That's some coach's demented philosophy to rally his troops and hopefully hold them to where they don't pay attention to what's going on in life.
Let me right before I go to my second break, and I'm only asking you this because I just saw the interview, and I'm like, well, I'm having Bill Watts on the show, so I have to ask him this, and you might get a chuckle out of this, or maybe it's legitimate. I was just watching an interview with Bill Dundee, and he was talking about when he booked for you, and he said that he booked a program with him and a midget when he was booking for you, and he said that you were against the program from the beginning, but eventually it got to the point where you had a meeting with the boys and said boys were being outdrawn by a bunch of midgets. Is that true?
You know, if Dundee said it, I wouldn't say it wasn't, but I don't remember it.
Oh, okay.
So I don't remember which program it was. Dundee was a midget in so many ways, and yet he had a brilliant mind. And so a challenge for me, because Dundee wanted in the ring so bad, was to keep him out of the ring, because he'd have been if he'd have been my booker, he'd have tried to get Andre the Giant to do a job for him. But Dundee was a brilliant guy and a great guy, and I found him a person of integrity. And I loved the time I spent with him, and tried a lot of things with him, and boy, I'd say 90% of them worked. So I've got nothing but the highest regard for Dundee. I will always tease him and have fun with him, but you know, and the truth of the matter is, Dundee was not a big guy, and so he had that small man's concept of many things, and it just wouldn't have fit. I couldn't have him go out there and try to beat Dr. Death or somebody like that. He'd end up getting stuffed in a basket if he wasn't my booker.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to head to the second break, and again, when I put you on hold, we're going to come back and visit one more trip to the past.
All right.
All right, fantastic. We are speaking with the author of The Cowboy and the Cross, which is available now on Amazon.com, and also let me throw a plug in there for his website, CowboyBillWatts.com, which has more information about the book and himself. He is Bill Watts, and he is here on Pro Wrestling Radio. You're listening to Pro Wrestling Radio in two places, one live on the internet on WBCB1490.com, archived on my website, ProWrestlingRadio.com, and on the air on WBCB 1490 AM.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here in the dressing room at the Irish McNeil Boys Club. They're ministering to Ted DiBiase. He is badly lacerated on the forehead. There is arterial damage. There's a problem stopping the blood flow. They're applying a pressure bandage and wrapping it very tightly. Ted DiBiase has demanded that he be able to have this world's title match with Ric Flair. He said he has waited long enough. It's taken him a year to get this bout. Some men never get the bout. And he's afraid Ric Flair will use this as an excuse not to defend that title against him. You know, I remember I was at the Superdome when Roberto Duran fought Sugar Ray Leonard. He quit because he had a stomach ache, and it turned my stomach, because I think when you have a world's title bout, you go no matter what. You don't have a few extra days of training or anything else. When the time comes, you got to go. And that's how Ted DiBiase feels, and I respect him for that feeling. So we are going to let him wrestle Ric Flair for the world's title. Grizzly Smith has already gone down to inform Joel and Jim at the desk. But I do want to warn you, there is a pressure bandage applied, but there is arterial damage. If that bandage comes loose, it could get very gory. Therefore, use parental discretion about letting your children watch, or if you have a weak stomach, you may not want to watch this bout, because coming up next, and we're not going to stop it for blood, it's going to go. The world's title is at stake. Ric Flair defending against Ted DiBiase. Now let's go to Jim and Joe.
And now back to more Pro Wrestling Radio. I'm your host of the show,
All righty, we are back with Cowboy Bill Watts. And you know what I really liked about that promo was the fact that you didn't have to yell and scream, but I could still sense that emotion coming out of you.
Well, yeah, you know, like I say, it was an emotional play of life, and I'd like to take a lot of credit for our promotion at the time, in that we tried to always still come back and have high moral and ethical value, and realize we were in a dysfunctional business, and we were certainly deceived by our own thoughts in that, and trying to justify without even thinking about it. I mean, I'm looking back now with that hindsight, but still, we had a higher responsibility, we felt, because we realized we were dealing in an audience that was designed to address children.
Yeah.
And so we always tried to keep in mind that our audience was a family audience. And when people ask me today about the business today and what are my thoughts on it, I asked, somebody one question. I said, well, because this person happened to be a Christian, asked me about it. And I said, well, stop and just please tell me 10 things it does that are pro-God. And I said, no, that's too hard. Let's talk about 8 things. Or let's find one thing it does pro-God. Or let me make it even secular. Tell me one thing that your child can watch pro wrestling today and see that you would want them to learn morally or ethically. Would it be how they treat authority? Would it be how they treat women as the opposite sex? Would it be how they ridicule God? Would it be, would it be how they represent people who are obviously almost, and I don't know, but I'm just saying obvious, I don't watch their program, but I know who's on it, that are obviously taking steroids.
Yeah.
Just tell me one thing that you think that, and it's like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, how about when you finally come home someday and your kid, then you're trying to discipline your kid and he shoots you a double finger?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I guess it was, maybe 8 years ago or so, and I went to a WWF house show, and it was right when Austin hit big, and I was sitting in these seats, and I saw a family coming up, a husband and wife and their kids, and they all had these Steve Austin shirts with the middle finger up.
That's right.
And I said, how crazy is this? I said, what am I watching here?
Well, right, and so, like I said, when your child at some point you're trying to discipline him, and that's his answer to you is that double finger.
Yeah.
Well, my dear father or mother or whoever it is, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
We can't tell our children, don't do as I do as I say. Mm-hmm. Children learn by what they see, not by necessarily what they hear when it comes about setting a moral and ethical value. So again, we tried to always have, and I'm sitting here with hindsight because, our shows were pretty tough too, but we always had that standard that we, just like that thing, as you heard me say, if it got too out because of what had happened, we were going to put our own slide up.
Yeah.
Now, I realized psychologically that slide was a great effect, but bottom line, it also said that we're not going to expose families to some of these things if we feel they're beyond the taste or the good or how a family should be. In other words, we're going to respect that.
Yeah.
And so we created. See, to me, if the promotion is a part and party and allows everything to happen and doesn't stop or stand for anything, then the promotion is corrupt. So we tried to maintain a balance, and that was really brought home to me by a lesson I learned from Eddie Graham in Florida when I was down there and I was the booker, and so but I was also working and had a top slot to work in, and because that's where anybody that's a decent booker that wrestled was going to push himself, because first of all he knew himself better than anything else. Mm-hmm. But the way Eddie started, he said, "Well, look, Bill," he said, for long-term effectiveness, you need to make your own angle, maybe not the key angle, but keep it healthy. I know you have that drive, and you certainly earned that right, because every place you've ever been, you've been on top. Mm-hmm. But you've got to learn how to develop other talent and to develop their angle. And so that I was doing very, very good at. But so then a lot of times I had already figured out I could get over by talking.
Yeah.
And so I got myself established on television, but then I would come out and interrupt Gordon Soley, who was the host of our show. And it got to be more and more, and pretty soon I'm denigrating him, or I'm kind of putting him down on his own show, and I was his boss in a way, so he had to go for it. And I don't know if he told Eddie or complained to Eddie that, gee whiz, Bill's coming in and interrupted me so much, and he's or what. But anyway, Eddie called me, and Eddie was always so smooth. He'd call you first, and it was always like a social call, and you really didn't. He was going to lead around to where he was going, and he was such a master at it. I used to think, come on, Eddie, let's go. I know that you're not passing the time of day, but that's how he taught.
Yeah.
And he was so good at it, and I appreciate him so much. I learned so much. But finally, he came to. He said, Bill, I was just wondering, what if you went on the Johnny Carson show? It's the hottest show in America today. I said, yeah. And he said, then what if you insulted Johnny Carson and ridiculed him and kept interrupting him? Do you think that how long do you think you'd be on the show? I said, not long. He'd take you right off the show. He'd just call a commercial break and you'd be gone. He said, do you think you'd ever be invited back? I said, no way. he said, well, all right, Gordon Soley, everybody knows, is in the office that he's our employee. He's an employee of this company. And you're the booker, and you own part of the office, in that I brought you into that position. He said, so you have a lot of sway over what's going on. So Gordon, in a way, is working for you and with you. Mm-hmm. But when you walk out there, he's still our voice of Florida Championship Wrestling. When you denigrate him on the show, you kill any credibility he has, and if you kill off the credibility he has, because if he was the host, he wouldn't put up with it, then you're killing the credibility of the promotion. What a lesson. You never saw anybody on any of my shows ever be able to personally denigrate the announcer.
Yeah.
And also, conversely, you never saw any announcer that could make himself bigger than the wrestlers, because it was the wrestlers that were putting a fanny over 17 inches, not the commentator.
Yeah. Let me ask you, coming off of that, and this is part of my question, well, just a comment. In reading your book, one thing that truly comes out throughout the book is the genuine affection you had for your guys over the years, which is something that's rare. I don't really get that in a lot of the books that I've read. And speaking of announcers, Jim Ross, for lack of a better word, he hasn't been treated very well over the last several months. What are your thoughts about the way that he's been treated by the WWE?
Well, first of all, realize that I'm not close enough to know, because I don't watch it. Mm-hmm. I don't watch wrestling anymore. I haven't watched it for a long time. And Jim is somebody that I have a great deal of affection for, because Jim earned his position with me. I got hired Jim out of college, and then when I left, he was working for Leroy, and he put up the ring, he refereed, he did it all, and then I found out he had a great background in radio and sales, and so when he came back with me, he earned his way, and he earned his way because he always had ideas. Jim Ross loves this business, but nothing was given to him. You earned your way in our business at that time. You didn't walk in and were given something. So Jim earned it all, and he became then my commentator. He became my syndicator. He became my right-hand man. And I'll say this: Jim has continued, and I don't know how long he's been under contract to Vince. I think something like 10 years. Yeah. And he's been completely loyal to Vince. He's been totally loyal to Vince. And I think from just what I've heard, that he's very hurt by how little value that seemed to have, and that he thought that he had earned a certain loyalty and a certain position with Vince, and that was not carried forward, that Vince felt he could demean or crush Jim at any moment, which, everybody says, well, it's a work. Well, it is, but gosh darn it, there's still some, Jim's the kind of guy that if he's given me that much of his time, let me tell you something, when a guy that was just a main eventer, and I say just because that was so important, but if he was just a main eventer and leaving me, I still wanted to be sure that he understood how he was going to leave. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't feel that, I understood that he could say no. And certainly I always exercised that if I was leaving your area, you better come talk to me about how you wanted me to leave it. Don't assume that it's because it was your area that I was going to fold up and let you just do anything you wanted to me on the leaving. You better make sure, because first of all, I understood that there was no one able to make me do anything. Right. That was established a long time ago. So, and so Jim, I think, feels that after all this loyalty, which he certainly had earned and has proven time and time again, Jim's always been loyal to everybody he's ever worked for. And that he thought that possibly it deserved a little more consideration. And again, that's me on the outside looking in. I have no idea to the inner machinations of Vince's company or anything else, because I don't look at it. But when you're in a corrupt hen house, then what do you expect?
Well, listen, what a better way to go out. I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and coming on the show today. And I have so much more to ask you, so I'd love to have you back on in a couple months.
Well, be anytime. You've certainly handled me with tremendous class and taste, and I certainly appreciate it, and I have enjoyed it. You've made my day. Again, and you plug my website. I hope people will go there. I hope that people, when they read my book, that they'll enjoy the entertainment part of it, but they'll also see what I'm trying to share with them about there being more to life than just what appears in the material, and that maybe they gain some that, or at least get to a point they question it. And again, my www.cowboybillwatts.com. Thanks so much for plugging it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Take care, Bill.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. All right, that is Cowboy Bill Watts. His book is The Cowboy and the Cross. It is #1 as far as the bestsellers go in the wrestling category at Amazon. And let me tell you this, and I'm not just saying this because he was on the show. The book is phenomenal. The book is absolutely phenomenal. Whether you're a fan of Mid-South or UWF of his or not, just to get his insight, I'll go on record and say, him and Vince McMahon, the two most brilliant men that I've ever come across in wrestling, and what an honor it was to have him on, and you better believe that I will have him back. His website, again, is cowboybillwatts.com, and wow, what a fast hour. Well, stay tuned, because Bill Melody is following me with the Country Music Hall. Bill made everything happen behind the scenes. Bill will be playing the best in country music up until 6, Bill. 6 o'clock tonight, back tomorrow at 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. 5 big hours of Big Bill Melody tomorrow. And 1 big hour of myself next Saturday at 12:05. And if you missed any of the Cowboy Bill Watts interview exclusively here on Pro Wrestling Radio, you can catch the archive show. I would say by the end of the weekend, a transcript will be available by midweek. Again, his website is cowboybillwatts.com. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy Saturday night's main event. It's back tonight on NBC for the first time since 1992. Have a great weekend, everybody.